welcome back to the Simply Human podcast and YouTube channel. I'm Christina, Caro, clinical psychologist, and my partner, executive coach Karen Lee Lynskey, is traveling this week, so I'm flying solo. So in the last 4 episodes, we have been going over the cognitive processing functions that Carl Jung identified in his model of psychological types. So we have started with what he identified as the 4 perceiving functions, or how we gather data, how we observe without coming to any conclusions or organizing that information. So he called it an irrational function because it is just a pure acquisition of information. Carl Jung identified 2 different poles of perceiving, which he identified as sensing and intuition. Now, each of those have a subtype. So there is sensing that is outward oriented, which he called extroverted sensing, sensing that is inward focused, that he called introverted sensing, then intuition that's outward focused, extroverted intuition, and intuition that is an inward process, introverted intuition. Now, for this episode, what we wanted to do was to sum this all up into a model that you can use either in your organizations or even in your own life on how to take this knowledge and to help you gather data that is in a holistic model. And then in the next few episodes, we are going to be going over the judging or evaluating and organizing process. And we will present this decision-making model. And then you bring these 2 models together and you can use it to help you just make any kinds of decisions in your life. And so this is called the Z model of decision making. Now, before I start, don't forget, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share, and hit the notification button so you know when the next episodes are posted. And if you are a podcast listener, if you look into your show notes, there is a text us link, and you can hit that and it'll send us directly an email with any questions that you might have. So let's get into the model. Now, let's start again with understanding that in addition to those 4 different ways of perceiving, remember that each one also has a different orientation in time. So we had the extroverted sensing that has an orientation in time in the here and now. Introverted sensing is the present and how it relates and associates to the personal past experience. We have intuition in the extroverted attitude that is the present into the immediate future on what something could be. And we have introverted intuition, whose time orientation is the entire span of past, present, and future. So now let's get into the Z model. So as you can see, it's called the Z model because it's shaped like a Z. And in each corner, we have each of the perceiving functions. Now, how do we use this model? So I just went over a reminder about what each of the processing preferences, what their strength, their orientation is towards time. And there's a little sub list underneath each of the function types, little prompts to remind you about what they stand for. So we can see under extroverted sensing, we have facts, concrete data, literal and objective observations. We have sort of the practicality and the details. When we move over to the sensing and the introverted attitude, we have experiences, we have impressions of the facts, memories, preserving of tradition and conserving, and also existing frames of reference. If we go to the extroverted intuition, we have the possibilities, novel connections, innovation, transforming, challenging the status quo, and new ideas. And then we move over to the other corner. So I guess if you're on the podcast, it is the far right corner or the bottom corner of introverted intuition. You have strategic vision, hidden connections, experimental innovation, integration, meanings and symbol, and insights. Now, if you take a look at this and you think about it, if you have a sense of your own preference and you think about when you've been needing to make a decision and you're gathering data, most likely you focused on one corner of this Z model, and you probably maybe didn't really do the other three, or if you did do something, it was probably one directly diagonal from your preference. But you can see all of this data is relevant to making a decision. And let me just walk through an example to show you on just a basic, really simple example. The problem here would be, say, I want to buy an electric pickup truck. Okay, so that's my sort of, I'm gathering data in which I'm going to make a decision on buying an electric pickup truck. So if I start with the top left corner of extroverted sensing and focus on facts, that's where I'm going to be, probably putting my spreadsheet together on the specifications. What's the price? What's the range that the vehicle can go? What's the financing that's available? What's the model? What's the make? What colors does it come in? Is it all-wheel drive? Is it two-wheel drive? What's the sound system, right? All of that is just factual data that it's objective because anyone can access that data. Then we move on the Z over to the top right, and we have introverted sensing. That's going to be tapping into the memory and experience base. What's the performance history on this type of vehicle? And what's the performance history on these types of batteries? Is there a recall history? What's any experience I might have? I say it's a Ford. Have I owned a Ford before? What's been my experience? Did I like that kind of a vehicle, or did I not like that type of a vehicle? This is what I'm going to be looking within myself. And I might also ask people that I trust about their experiences. Hey, you used to own a Ford. Did you like the Ford? Did you prefer, the Ram? What was it like? So you can hear how the data is a little bit different. It's subjective. It's based on sense impressions. And then I need to sort of think about, I'm going to move into that bottom left corner to intuition and the extroverted attitude and start thinking, okay, but what am I going to be using this vehicle for? What are the possibilities? Am I going to be towing? Am I going to be camping? Do I want to have a shell on it? Or might I be converting it into something I can camp out of, right? I'm going to start brainstorming all those possibilities of what I might be doing with the vehicle. And then we move over into the final bottom right corner of the Z, intuition and the introverted attitude. And then I'm going to be thinking a little bit more now, big picture, away from that vehicle. What is the EV infrastructure like where I think I'm going to be driving? Are there going to be places to charge up? Are they even in place yet? What future adaptations might I foresee? Like, after I could share, like, I've been trying to think about my next vehicle, and I'm sort of between a Ford Bronco and a Jeep. But I know that down the road, it's like, I'm thinking of doing this like replacement roof that has a pop-up tent. It's not a pop-up tent that you put on the top. It's actually one that you completely replace the roof so that you can install this new roof that has an integrated tent that you could enter from inside the vehicle. Because I'm thinking, I'm a female who goes camping, and I'm thinking about safety issues and like, oh, if something happens, I don't want to have to climb outside of my vehicle to get into it. I want to be able to jump into my vehicle from my sleeping area if I have to make a quick getaway. So I'm thinking about these future potential scenarios. And I know that I love camping, and I'm thinking about the infrastructure, and I'm probably buying an electric vehicle because it's meaningful to me about doing something good for the environment. So you can see those are all also important components to have in gathering the data that you need to make a decision. So in organizations, the goal is to have people on your team cover all the bases, so each corner. So if you know what people's preferences are, that's easy. If you've ever administered the Myers-Briggs or the Milan inventory of personality styles in your organization, and you validated it, people might have some awareness of what their preference is. And you can say, oh yeah, I'm the fact person. I'm the fact person. Let me gather all of that on the problem we're facing. And oh, I'm the systems thinker. I can handle that. Now, if you don't have a whole team or you don't have all the bases covered, so especially like if this is a couple, like if you're in a partnership, you're at most going to only have 2 bases covered because there's only 2 of you. How you deal with that in this model is that you would look at who is diagonal across from you. So if I don't have this introverted intuition corner covered, because again, that's a very rare type, it's only like 1 point, or I guess I total like 3% of the population, very good chance you don't have someone who can cover that. Well, the person who is most likely to be able to have that covered is the person who is opposite on the diagonal, and that's the extroverted sensate person. And why that is true is it's too complicated in this video to go through, but just trust me on this one. For that extroverted sensate, introverted intuition is going to be either their third preference, their third function, or their tertiary, or their fourth, which Jung called the inferior, but at least it's accessible. It's not one of the ones that's in the trunk of the car. When we use the metaphor of dominant being the driver, your auxiliary being the passenger, the co-pilot, the tertiary being the teenager in the back seat, and the fourth function or the inferior being the toddler in the back seat, and then the other 4 in the trunk of the car. So when we're just doing data collection, the person who's opposite on the diagonal will have that function as their third or fourth. For all the other ones, it will be in the trunk of the car, so it's not going to be as easy for them to access it. So this is why I'm advising that if you have a base that is not covered, have the person opposite on the diagonal try to fill in for you. Now, I am going to have a link to this handout in the show notes where you can download it as well. And if you just stop and look at this, you can see it's a holistic approach to gathering data, and that we will have a much better chance of coming up with a well thought out decision when we have taken the time to gather all the relevant data that needs to be considered in that deliberation. So I invite you to go ahead, try using this model somewhere in your life, whether it's in your work environment or something, like I said, planning a vacation, buying a vehicle. This can be a very helpful tool, and it'll start to help you start using the knowledge that we have been conveying to you over the last 4 episodes. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments below, or you can email us at simplyhuman.connect@gmail.com. So don't forget, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and share this with anybody who you think might find it helpful. And until next time, you guys, be curious, and I'll see you later. Bye.